This world itself has a vast amount of change that has happened from birth to now. I write and speak on this in a way to help others understand the nature of who I am as a person. God has never made a mistake and definitely sticks to what he says. When it pertains to anyone's life, I have had some different experiences, you know, in this world, not by choice. Many of them show up when I would least expect. This is a writing and something for someone to hear, and it's not only my history as an African American, but also who the slaves were that came here to America's shores. Whether anyone wants to know this or not, it is vital that I put this information out to the best of my ability. I have done much research on this history. Many may ask, why is this important? Well, in order to continue to move forward, you have to learn about what happened in the past and not repeat the same mistakes to break the generational curses that have followed the so called African American from the shores of Africa, Europe, Arabia, and many other places during my ancestors' scattering. And I pray that this helps many people to understand the divine calling that has been placed on my life from birth to glory in so many words. I thank God for his son Yeshua, which the world calls Jesus Christ. Um, I will not exist without his divine love for me and my extended family who have endured the horrors of being cast away into the daughter of Babylon, which I feel, according to Revelations 18, which is America itself. But not only that, it's an illusion. It basically alludes to also the world, which the Gentiles are still in rulership, which are Japheth's descendant, the Europeans and Asians. Um, and I would like to thank God and whoever is able to read and hear this writing that I have spent many hours and days on. And I pray God bless you. Now, to start out with what I have to say when it comes to myself, my name is Wendell Ramon Cummings, and I was born October 11, 1984, on Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, at 2 pounds and 4 ounces, to Wendell and Anita Carol Brantley Cummings. My mother, during this time of my birth, worked at McDonald's, Hardee's, and my father was working with the city of Dothan, which is in Alabama, the waste management department for the city, and he was a part of the Army National Guard, which is a reserve unit for the state of Alabama. He was a soldier. We were living on Williams Avenue in Dothan um, when my sister Nika was born on October the 20th, 1986. My father was still with the Alabama National Guard, and as I was growing up, I would get picked on just like most, you know, most children I played with in the neighborhood, including my family members and cousins. And yes, I was very different than most children and mostly introverted at times, depending on who I was around. Um, A lot of times I stayed to myself. Mostly I had my little sister Anika and my cousins to play with. I watched many different times as my family struggled and argued over bills. This is pretty much predominant throughout any of the African American communities and also families that have endured from 1619, from slavery all the way to the present day, which we know that in 2019 was 400 years that we've been here. And I do believe, and I believe this with my whole being, that that was a prophecy according to Genesis 15 and 13. So basically, I'm telling you that we are the children of Israel, the African Americans scattered across the four corners of the earth, and also the ones who are in the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, and everywhere else. Now, it bothered me a lot to hear my parents arguing many times. I did not understand why they were acting like children, you know, bickering and all this other stuff. You know, even though they taught me the tenets of the Bible, until I was older, I was able to really understand. I wasn't able really to understand what they were really talking about. You know, I had no idea. But I cried some nights because of them arguing and arguing as I would hold my a brown bear that my mom gave me when I was born. That's basically my comfort zone. Um, that would basically make me at ease when I go to sleep at night. Now, I will hold my sister because even though I didn't understand what was really happening, I knew it was you know, um, not right for them to do that. So, as most children, I would reflect on what I saw them do, and it carried on into my adulthood. I dislike very much the fact that I had to endure it, but it made me learn a valuable lesson that everything in this world is not always what it seems. I used to talk to God, and the one who I was taught to love, respect, honor, and follow everything He had said in the book, but this is not what I always grew up learning. You know, people getting murdered and, you know, all the atrocities that people do, backstabbing. I mean, it's a whole list. You know, I was basically taught by many to do what I say and not what I do. That phrase within itself is what you would call a double standard. Part of this is true and part of it's a lie. And now that I am old enough to understand, God specifically said to lead by example, and so did His Son Yeshua, who the world calls Jesus Christ. And Yeshua's name has been wrongfully identified with religion, but this is not just why I'm writing this. If you look at Hosea 4 and 6, it states, "My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, because you have rejected knowledge. I will reject you." I know the God of Israel has been with my family for many generations, since the founding of my people being established, since the biblical times, starting from the Exodus in ancient Egypt. This is the migration pattern that we follow, from those times to now. And according to Deuteronomy chapter 28, that's what happened to us. We fell upon those under those curses, and they stayed with us because of us constantly doing what we want to do and also not doing righteously by what God has commanded. So we have repeated a cycle. And my dad and mom moved when I was about 5 years old, and my sister Anika was three, to a house in Kinsey, Alabama, which is probably no more than like 10 minutes away from Dothan, Alabama, where we were staying in, basically like I would consider like the ghetto. Um, and I attended Webb Elementary and middle school. During my years at Webb, I would make a lot of friends and have my first joyful emotion in which I really didn't understand, which was love. I would notice little girls my age and I will basically gawk over them, basically get all mushy and stuff around them and look at how pretty they were. But the imagination was soon crushed by my dad because of the academic grades I received when it came down to report cards and my behavior. I was a child full of energy and did not have the slightest idea how to control it. Um, I loved to laugh and wanted others to have fun and laugh with me. My dad was very strict on my character and actions, but he was fair. I felt at times my dad was really hard on me, um, but I didn't understand how much I would need what he was teaching me in life and that and that is to stand on my own when I didn't have anyone. Um, as a black male in America and in my neighborhood, we have always been taught to show no weakness to no one and know that we came from royalty. Um, Racially profiling has continued for years, and just because many I grew up with didn't experience it doesn't mean it wasn't happening. Some of my teachers grew up some of my teachers growing up um liked me and some didn't, you know. I remember in third grade, Miss Brewer, my third grade teacher, who I thought was pretty to me, and still to this day, she is still pretty to me. If I had to describe Miss Brewer, I would say a well educated black woman and teacher who deserves so much credit um, to my experience and endeavors that I have embarked upon in my life. Miss Brewer was a very tough teacher to me, um, but she had to, because of the position she held by her being a black woman. She taught us in our class that nothing in this world is given to you. You have to earn everything you do. I remember, if memory serves me correctly, that Miss Brewer gave me a class project to ask our parents about our family tree. Okay, now each child had to ask their parents to help them with this class project. And honestly, my parents were always working, they were so busy, and they didn't have the time to help me with it. Um, it it helped me with it, so I showed up to class not prepared for the project. And what came next, when it was time for me to go up and tell my class what I had, I could not go further back than my grandparents. I was really embarrassed in front of the third in front of my third grade teacher, Miss Brewer, because as most children, I just didn't know who my ancestors were. I cried and I was ashamed because of my white classmates, aka Europeans or Asians or Indians, could go all the way back to like the ninth or 10th century, even further than that. Now, when class was over, my teacher was distraught. She went to the office and I had to follow her up to the principal's office. And she called my mother's job. My mother had received a call at her jobs at Russell's factory, which is basically a t-shirt factory. And and when my mother got to the school and I was on my way with her to the house, she asked me, why did I say anything to her? But I did, and she told me to go in my room because she was busy. When my dad got home, he was like, "What is this boy doing? You know, doing out of school? And what is he doing at home?" And she told him that she got a call from Miss Brewer, and the first reaction came from my dad was, "Boy, what have you done now at the school?" Yes, I was scared and thought I was about to get beat with a switch or daddy's leather belt. Pretty much anything that most black parents or elders or whoever can get their hands on, that's what you got your behind beat with. Um, this is when anyone would be thinking, run. My mom calmly explained that it was her fault, and my dad said, no, it is both our faults. Um, then he looked at me and said, son, you need to learn how to speak up. I shuddered and he hugged me, and then I shrugged and I went outside to play with Jarvis and his little brother Keon, which I grew up with them in Kinsey, Alabama. As I was going, as I was growing, my grades didn't improve until I hit about fourth grade, and I remember just before going to fifth grade that my dad beat me so bad that I had gashes in my back and had to wear a T-shirt with slits in it. My mom used a pair of scissors and cut holes in it. So the shirt, the cotton fabric, couldn't stick on my back. Um, and I wore my dad's big leather jacket with sunglasses on my face. My teacher tried to get me to take off my coat, but I told her no. And this was Miss McClaney. She said, "Excuse me?" I told her no. My dad said, "Don't take this jacket off for anyone." Mind you, it was about 90 degrees outside. So when my teacher, Mrs. McClaney, grabbed my jacket, she saw the gashes in my back and asked, "Who did this?" I never said I'm gonna put it like this. I never said a mumbling word, as they say what Christ did when he was on the cross. So she said, "If you do not tell me, I am going to have to call your parents and report this to the authority." What does she do? Well, just that. Miss McClaney called my parents and called the sheriff, and they showed up at my house. I was scared and hid under my bed. And the sheriff and my dad had words. Um, the sheriff asked, "Are you okay, son?" When my dad called me to the door, my dad answered, and the sheriff told him, "I asked your son. I didn't ask you." I told him I'm okay, and then he told us to have a nice day, and he pretty much left. Daddy was pissed, and asked me if I had anything to say. I told him no, I didn't. My fourth grade teacher pulled the jacket off, and I told her not to, and she did it anyway. My mom, as she always did, was talking and said, "That bitch." Not now, nobody didn't tell her to take that jacket off. What my parents at that time didn't realize was it affected me. Um, and in today's society, which they know now, that will be legally called child abuse, excuse me. And pretty much we have in this society now what they call social service, where they will examine that child and take that child away from you. Now, this is why most of the world will not understand black teachers are raising a child compared to their own teachings through any other culture. The African American is going down a path coming from slavery, lynchings, quarterings, raping, torture, being used as a child, being used as gator bait, um, racial profiling, and misidentity, also known as post traumatic slave syndrome. This type of behavior continues down to the day and has continued for many generations from 1619 to the present, when the first 20 odd slaves arrived in Jamestown, Virginia, on the North American shores. This process has been like um, this for about 400, over 400 years now. Um, even though 127 years before 1619 was the Spanish Inquisition, where the Catholic Church sent many of my ancestors um, here as children and forced baptism in Christianity away from their parents. I've wondered for so many years who my people were before getting here, but it would take a lot of time and research to obtain such knowledge, which my parents and grandparents did not know during my early childhood, so they couldn't tell me. Um, so when I hit about sixth grade was interesting because I was introduced to many different things when it came to just surviving and bridging the gap to go to high school a couple years down the road. At this time, I had started dating a female in the sixth grade. Her name was Jocelyn McKay, um, who I did follow, who I did fall in love with. But being the way I was, I passed through sixth grade and the seventh and dated her and a girl, a Mexican girl called Blanca Barnell. Um, Even though I knew this wasn't right, I ignored it, but I would have thought with some clarity I would have never done something like that to Jocelyn. Jocelyn had never done anything wrong to me, but I was cheating on her for not being able to see her like I wanted to. Um, no, I was young and dumb and did not understand at that time what treasure I actually possessed. Um, so let me fast forward. I dated Jocelyn until I was about in the 10th grade. And we broke up when I ran away to my godparents' house in Junction City, Kansas. Um, that was the wrong move to make because the lesson I learned um, then was you can't run away from problems or situations. Um, At this time, my parents were going through a divorce, and I did not know how to deal with it or take it. So it crushed me beyond anyone's comprehension, and it devastated my sisters and I. My mother cheated, or what many would or could call seeing another man while she was still married to my dad. It hurt a lot because she always was saying how much she loved him. To me, that didn't seem like love. Um, so after 6 months with my godparents, um, my dad, well, I'll say this. After being with my godparents for about 6 months, and my dad, this young girl at the time named Whitney, was who I was head over heels crazy about her, wanting to be with me. Um, but it was not mutual across the the board because she cheated on me. The same thing that I did to Jocelyn back home in Alabama. Um, I felt in my spirit at the time that I got really homesick and wanted to go back home. So I went back home in Dothan, Alabama, that my parents moved to in 1996. But I had to go to summer school before my 11th grade year, which was in 2001, and started because I failed English. Um, I made it to the 11th grade and started back dating Jocelyn, but the tables had turned again because Jocelyn started dating Samuel Crawford. That hurt me because of the love I had for her and how much we had shared together. But everything does happen for a reason. During this time, I went ahead and enlisted for the Army National Guard, and through 9 weeks of basic training and 2 months of advanced individual training, which we call AIT, um, I became a light construction engineer. I did not anticipate that what happened. I didn't anticipate what would happen next because when I hit 12th grade, my life went on a huge, massive, extreme roller coaster. Um, when I graduated, I started hanging out with one of my, you know, homeboys, Kevin Buzz, and a bunch of white girls drinking and partying with them. I ended up leaving my dad, mom, sisters, and crossed over the water, or we call it the pond, after 6 months to transfer from the Army National Guard to the active duty military to my first duty station in Vilseck, Germany. Um, I partied so hard when I got up and drank when I fell asleep in the nightclubs after processing my unit, and it continued the 2.5 years I was there in Germany. I met some friends in Germany, but I made a lot of enemies too. And the Turkish citizens that stayed in Germany, coming from their homeland in Istanbul, Turkey, were very close knit group. They hate Americans, but blacks of the United States and pretty much anywhere else, they hated the most. They felt we took their women, or we take their women from them, and they always traveled about 10, maybe to about 30 deep, both male and female in the group. When they fight, they're deadly because um, their skill at getting blades inside of establishments in European clubs. They will send the smallest one of them to you to fight, and if you are not careful, another one, another one of them will run up on you and sneak you real quick and stab you to death with a box blade or knife. When I was in the club, South of Ville said at this club called Flashpoint, it was a very known club in which the Czechs, Russians, Germans, Turkish, pretty much anybody in Europe will come to and will congregate with military troops and dance and hook up and have fun while getting intoxicated. Beer fests were fun, all dangerous as well because some would get you so drunk you would pass out and would be so disoriented in their surroundings. I've had many nights where I didn't realize how I made it back to my barracks room and the life of being young and dumb as a soldier. I spent about 5 months in Germany before I deployed for the first time to Iraq for the war that was going on during that time. Yes, I was excited and scared at the same time, but shortly after, when I was in the air flying into Al Al Salim, which is the Kuwait International Airport, where flights for international passenger and U.S. troops have flown into go to Iraq and Afghanistan, it all changed. Um, RPGs, which are rocket propelled grenade, was flying from the ground at the charter flight, which we were flying into um, Kuwait, um, into the into the Ali Al Salim airspace. The insurgent fighters wanted to kill us and bring our plane down into entering into Iraq. We took a drive in a chartered bus half an hour away from the airport to a base camp, which we called Camp Virginia, to receive a briefing for our operation under up under General David H. Petraeus, which now he's currently the which we would call the man at the CIA. He's the director. Um, he was a four-star general of the theater in Iraq. We were told during that time, anything in a 2 mile radius, it dies. That's man, woman, and child, doesn't matter. And be prepared for whatever you encounter and what you see. I saw many deaths in Iraq during that time that I was in operation in the country of Iraq from both sides of the war. My squad leader and I drove up the road for about 4 days. And upon the first day, our convoy was hit by an improvised explosive device, which we call an IED. Um, the explosions continuously happened from Camp Virginia in Kuwait all the way to the city of Mosul, um, which in biblical times, Mosul was called ancient Nineveh. Um, yes, I walked across and drove across that ancient land in which the prophet Job was told to speak to the Ninevites, and he disobeyed God and was thrown off the ship of sailors and swallowed up by a whale and was in that whale in its belly for about 3 days and 3 nights. My spirit, the entire time I was there in Iraq, um, I was I felt really uneasy, like being here in America with all these demons and foul spirits running through this place. Um, when I got to Farmarez in Mosul, we started to set up our operation base camps and communication. So we could stay in contact with our elements around us to communicate while doing our construction mission while we was there in Missoula, and also the command and general of the entire operation theater that we was at. Um, we spent a lot of days filling in potholes, building air pads, um, run basically airstrips, even refortifying buildings, and also base camps that for American troops in Iraq. And truth be told, we were stuck in a lot of places, and we traveled and resupplied and did construction missions everywhere in Iraq from all different parts of it. That's how much we was traveling and moving. We had been there for only a few months before it felt longer, but it did feel longer that we were, there. After my first 8 months of being in Iraq, I went home on honor and married my first wife, which I made a mistake because I was young and really didn't understand what it meant to be married and also what love really meant. It was not just having someone with you, it goes deeper than that. Her name was Crystal Holly. She drained my entire bank account and had relations with a dope dealer. And it hurt me very much during that time. And which I didn't realize I was not ready to be married to anyone because I didn't even understand what marriage meant at that time. And after about 9 months of being with her, we was divorced. Um, and when I closed that chapter, I transitioned to a new duty station, Fort Riley, Kansas, where my godparents were. And I spent about 4 years at that duty station. I jumped into another marriage with Lashani Warren, and that lasted about a year and a half. She did exactly the same thing and went after someone who abused her, um, without me knowing, but she was not able to get a hold to any of the money that I had. At that time, I was not good with money, and at that time, I really needed, financial management. I went after that back to Iraq with a new combat engineer, which they were called the Alpha Company, 41 BSTB, basically basic support tactical battalion. But I was with a combat engineering unit, which dealt with a lot of infantry tactics and demolition explosives. And we arrived in Baghdad after about 4 months. After about, I say, I was within 4 months after me getting to my unit. We arrived in Baghdad, which is about 50 miles north of ancient Babylon. And even though we arrived to right sea, left sea, right, that's what we call this. That's the transition with a new element that was there that we was taking over from. It really was a rough transition into that operation theater. The explosive devices were kind of mostly which we would have thought that it was not even humanly possible. Hundreds and thousands of pounds of explosives were found that year by us in Iraq. Um, and we encountered not only American troop deaths, but we also experienced Iraqi citizens as well. There are many nights I had cried myself to sleep and had horrible dreams of the aftershock of what was going on around me. Um, I was having dreams of death, of dying, and also when things were happening, it was sort of like a predestined account of an event happening. Um, when I was deployed, there I saw in my dream and a vision of being shot and blown up in not even 2 days. And God being my witness, after I dreamed that I was being shot and blowed up, um, I got shot 2 days later in the left side of my jaw, and I got hit in the face with glass and debris and blown up on the left side of my truck. Um, Throughout the deployment, my compound or base of operation that I was on during the mission that I was doing, I was hit one night with the base itself was hit with 166 rockets and mortars just as I was coming in from Baghdad and out like in the city itself. And I was doing what we call route patrol, route clearance, looking for IEDs. And during that time, my unit lost my Lieutenant Jones. He was my commanding officer during that time, and a good friend from Fort Riley, Kansas, and also Specialist Simpson, who was very respected by, you know, our peers and seniors. It was a real hard pill to swallow because I had also got sick with pneumonia and the flu when I had almost had my head blown off by an RPG, which is basically a rocket propelled grenade blowing up, missing my head and hitting the wall that was behind me while trying to load up equipment, um, like tanks, Bradleys, and Abrams. These are tractor vehicles with um, basically cannons on them for destroying structures or enemy combatants. Um, and I was there, and all this happened when I was there for almost 18 months. At the time, I was engaged to Nikisha Swindle, and during that time, we got married that May of 2008. I was married to her for about 5 years. During that time, we were not really ready because much as we thought we both were in love with each other, we didn't really understand what love or marriage meant, and a lot went on during the time. You know, lying, cheating. Neither one of us really understood the other, and we had no idea we were divorced in 2012, but were agreed upon this divorce to do so. And after we divorced, I went to Germany, felt really low, and basically I hit rock bottom. I did not talk to Nikisha for years, and I met Stephanie Maltzer. She's Italian and German, and we were married in 2013 in Denmark, and I had my daughter Yasmina in 2014 of July, in Amberg, Germany. And I was stationed back in Germany my second time in the military. And during the year of 2015, September, it was during a blood moon, I believe. I, my daughter Mina was about 1.5 years old. I was sweating, and when I woke up, um, I saw America getting destroyed, and the sky was like orange and red, and everyone was running around trying to get to a safe place, but there was nothing but chaos. People running. If you ever seen a chicken with its head cut off in the front yard running around, that's pretty much how it looks with people when they run around. They don't know where they're going. And while this all this destruction was happening, that's what was happening. And everyone pretty much was running around, and I was standing waiting on a seashore somewhere, I think down here in Florida. And you know, um, I was standing there, and a bunch of people around me were asking how we're going to get out of here. You know, uh, this place is getting torn apart, and they were cursing and they was confused and complaining, basically how our ancestors used to do back in the day when they was coming out of Egypt and they was getting laid out by Moses. Same thing. And a woman, she was my wife, and she spoke to them in a crowd, and another brother told them I was her husband, and she told them to hold their tongue and don't disrespect me because I'm receiving instructions from heaven. I'm not listening to what y'all talking about because y'all are not going to get us out of here. And then the woman replied, I love you. And I replied back the same. And but I stared at her, but at the moment that I was looking at her, I didn't really recognize her because it was like she was glowing in the face, so I couldn't really tell who she was. And then the sky rolls back like a scroll. And if you ever seen papyrus paper and you've rolled it up and then you end up rolling it back out and then you let it go and it rolls back up, that's exactly how the clouds were. And truth be told, I actually heard God speak in that dream, and it was loud. It was soft but loud at the same time. It was like calm. Then I ended up in a desert, which I believe was the Arabian desert, and with a bunch of those same people behind me, they were still cursing and basically showing their behind in front of the Son of God, which he appeared with an entire army and 10,000 upon 10,000 soldiers with him. And when I seen him, I bowed. And the people that was with me, they didn't bow. So I waited until he walked past me and I seen his feet. His feet was blacker. I'll put it like this. His feet was blacker than my t-shirt. And when this happened, after he walked past me, I jumped up and I yelled silence.